The 80s was a very important time for the perfume industry, both for men and women. In general, in the 80s, perfumes were all about being strong, powerful, maybe some, spicy, but in general, just very, very noticeable scents came out during the 80s, and many of them are still popular today. You have Obsession, you have Dracar Noir, you have tons of stuff that came out in the 80s. So, one interesting thing, one particular perfume, is called Joop. Let's see. Joop by Joop. It's a bit faded. Interestingly, it's actually pronounced Joop, which I did not know until recently, but I think most people probably could just call it Joop. So, the interesting thing about this fragrance, besides the strange name, is that it was originally marketed for men, it was designed for men, but pretty much as soon as it came out, it became popular among women. And that's not actually all that surprising because this fragrance is very just kind of unisex in nature. It has a unique list of notes. First of all, let's see. Take a look at that color. Like a magenta or violet or something. So that immediately, makes it particularly striking. So I'll put some on my wrist here. So immediately, it's quite spicy, actually, which is interesting. It has strong citrus notes that kind of remind me of Emerald or Shalimar, but then it kind of morphs into something a bit sweet and even a bit powdery. The top notes consist of orange blossom, mandarin orange, bergamot, and Amalfi lemon, so those citrus notes definitely are very noticeable. I would say in particular the orange. Well, I guess the orange and the lemon, both of them are pretty, prominent. So, then from there, in the middle notes, there's cinnamon, heliotrope, jasmine, cardamom, and lily of the valley. The cinnamon is really, I guess that was the spice that I got right off the bat. The cinnamon makes this completely unique because there's not a lot of perfumes that use cinnamon. They might use other spices like, nutmeg, cloves, that sort of thing. But cinnamon is very unique, and it's very, very prominent. It's not like a faint cinnamon. This is in your face sort of cinnamon. Then in the base notes, there are vanilla, tonka bean, sandalwood, patchouli, honey, tobacco, and vetiver. So there's this very interesting mix of sweet notes mixed with savory, smoky notes, honey and then tobacco or vanilla and vetiver, You actually can get the tobacco. It has that smokiness, but again, it's also, a bit similar to Shalimar in that way. That this is more of a subdued smokiness, but mixed with the sweetness of the honey and the vanilla, it makes for a very interesting fragrance, and I could definitely see why women immediately started wearing this along with men. This was released in 1989, so coming out of the 80s and into the 90s, and it's a very agreeable and very interesting, complex fragrance. I'm not a big fan of fragrances that, they only have a few notes, they're not that interesting, kind of superficial. This is very complex. You can experience this evolution of layers in this perfume. It seems like the longer it's on the skin, the spicier it becomes. More savory. Those sweet notes are still there, still the honey, still the vanilla. The citrus notes are becoming a bit faint. Yeah, they kind of phase out. You really get most of that citrus right away, and then it becomes a bit weaker. Or the orange blossom, which is more of a sweet floral rather than pure citrus, that's still there. The cinnamon is still very prominent. It's hard to detect the floral notes like the heliotrope or the lily of the valley because of those, those stronger notes of the spice, the tobacco, that sort of stuff. So the floral notes also kind of phase out, in my opinion. But the base notes and the cinnamon in the middle notes, very, very prominent. Especially the vanilla, the honey, the tobacco, and the cinnamon. Those 4 notes pretty much dominate this fragrance, and it's very nice though. You would expect, from the tobacco maybe, or from the sandalwood or the vetiver, you would expect that this would be too strong, maybe too overpowering, or just too savory, too smoky, that sort of thing. But this is perfectly balanced with those sweet notes, the vanilla and the honey in particular, and those sweet notes don't overpower themselves either. Sometimes perfumes go a bit too overboard with the sweet notes, especially honey. That's an easy thing to do with the honey note. But this has a very unique balance. Like, your nose is experiencing the tobacco, but then it's pulled back by the honey, and those two kind of clash, so you get this really kind of almost syrupy, smoky mixture. And very interesting. I am a fan of the tobacco note, that certain smokiness. That's a bit more subdued. You could get that same smokiness from Shalimar, but Shalimar is a bit too strong for some people. So if you want something smoky but a bit, on the more mellow side, this is definitely a really good choice. As for the longevity, it seems like a pretty potent fragrance. I could imagine this is an eau de toilette, so it's probably not going to last you, 10 hours, 9 hours. It's probably more of a 7-hour, maybe 6-hour fragrance, but it's still concentrated enough and potent enough, with those tobacco notes and with the wood notes, that, it should remain pretty strong for several hours. Besides that, the sillage, I would also say, is pretty prominent, which you would expect for any fragrance that uses, strong notes like tobacco or sandalwood or tonka bean, all those. So sillage is, I would say moderate, erring on the stronger side. It's definitely not weak or by any means. I can imagine you could, if you use too much of this, it probably would be a little bit overpowering, but using this in moderation, it would be a very nice, very kind of attractive fragrance for both men and women. Like I said, as soon as this was released, even though it was marketed towards men, women pretty much started wearing it right away. And it's just a really, I can imagine people would stop you on the street and ask you, well, what are you wearing? What is this? Because it is such an interesting, unique fragrance. There's not, especially these days, there's not a lot of perfumes that dare to mix, tobacco notes or, similar notes like that with honey notes, or, that kind of mixture isn't too common. So for that reason, it definitely, if you just want to try something different, try something intriguing, Joop or Joop, however you pronounce it, definitely high quality fragrance. And there are a few different types of Joop, because the brand is also called Joop along with this perfume. So there are a few different variations. I have, I believe, the original formulation from 1989. But other than that, this is a really good fragrance. I really like it. So if you have any opinions on this particular fragrance, you can leave those down in the comments below. If you like the video, leave a like, maybe subscribe, and I make videos throughout the week, so stick around for those.